Yes. All right. In case somebody needs it, I'm not sure they will. But again, welcome. Our brothers wanted to share greetings with you all. And this is not actually a Greek class. This Masood was in 6 semesters of Greek, 5 of them with me, and has become my teaching assistant. Actually, he was my assistant before, but he was a secret. I call him my ISI. ISI is equivalent of the NSA, except it's much more powerful in Pakistan and knows everything about you. So missionary, hide all you want. They know. They come on campus, look like students, and see what's going on, see if you're keeping to the prescribed mask and all that for opening this university and many other things. Actually, without the military behind the leadership, the country would not be able to be governed. So we are thankful for the powers that be that God has set up. But this is not a missions hour. Thank you for, I just wanted to, I thought you might be marking some papers in case someone wanted to give me the homework. Now, my first question before we proceed, how many folks are up through the end of chapter 3 and have done all the exercises? How many folks are up through chapter 3.1, the middle of the chapter, and have done the exercises, or at least some of them? Okay, thank you. How many folks are up through chapter 2 and have done at least some of the exercises? All right, so I know where we are. Just a little admonition. One cannot learn a language without a lot of work and repetition. So I'm not going to try to do what's called often Greek for ministries, where you get just a little bit of how to use a little bit of Greek. I want to bring you as far as I can on the high road, so that you can recognize grammatical forms even if we don't know them all. Particularly participles, which are really, really important in the Koine Greek of 2,000 years ago. And they're often in the King James Version, for example, not even translated properly at all, because 500 years ago, they didn't really know how to translate them. They just made gerunds out of all of them, having, going, seeing. So that's part of my goal to get there. One other thing, an announcement before I go any further, December 6th, mark it in your calendar. My colleague, Dr. Daniel Lantz, who is German, finished his PhD at Wheaton about 3 years ago, and has since that time been a professor of Old Testament at FC College, is consented to teach us the Hebrew alphabet. I wanted to get it from a better teacher, much better teacher, someone who was really up on correct pronunciation and all that. So December 6th, he will introduce us to the Hebrew alphabet. Now, there we will take the low road for sure, because the whole idea there is just to introduce you to Hebrew alphabet, how to pronounce Hebrew words a little bit, and mostly how to look for their meaning and use concordance with them. So mark that in your calendar. Maybe you'll do more than one class, but I'm just trying to sort of sneak him in. Not to you, but for him. Sneak him in, and maybe he'll do more than one. Because I really don't feel, well, I never feel adequate, so what's new? But especially for Hebrew. All right, I'm going to call this Building Simple Sentences, and I'm going to encourage you to read again thoroughly chapters 2 and 3 without continual study, and really almost daily, or at least 3 days a week. Repetition is a key to language learning. You can't do it without repeating. I always tell students, they love to cram. Well, I think US students love to cram. Um, Pakistani students can cram better than anybody in the world. They can they can go from 0 to A plus in 6 hours on one night. Trouble is, what remains a day or two afterwards? Languages need constant repetition so it begins to become part of you, so that it begins to get in the heart and you can learn the heart language of the people, whether it's the heart language of Paul or the heart language of Somali today, wherever you are. So if you have a really, really pressing question, you need to raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to barge ahead like an icebreaker ship and hope that I can move fairly quickly. I'm not always assuming that everyone remembers their English grammar. You will have noticed that in the book, he defines the verb as not only action, but also states of being, existence. So a verb is very important. The Greek verb is even more important than the English one because it encodes, we say, more information. Also, nouns actually encode more information because of the fact of inflection, which we'll look at in just a moment. But hopefully you have learned the present tense active voice. You remember we have passive voice. Remember in English? In Greek, we also have a middle voice. But we'll get to those later. The active voice, John hit the ball. John is the subject who does the acting, so we call it the active voice. First question we always ask when dissecting or actually conjugating, in this case, a Greek verb is what is the stem of the verb and what is the ending of the verb? Because unless I know the stem and can put the right ending with it, I won't be able to understand what's expressed. Also at this point, let me, for those who may not at any point continue, the dictionary or the lexicon form of any verb is in Greek, the first person singular, I, not the infinitive. We have the curious phenomenon that dictionaries will put the first person singular, luo, I lose, and put the definition as to lose, which is an infinitive, which we use in English. But it's become so common to use the first person singular and then to translate the infinitive that you will often find it that way, or teachers will say this verb means to loose, and they say luo, I lose. Or better, I am loosing, because the present tense in Greek generally expresses continuous action. Not always, but generally. The verb paradigm also contains the pronoun. So if we say luo, we say I lose. We don't need a pronoun with it. That's what I meant, that the Greek verb encodes more information than English. And hopefully you have learned that paradigm in chapter 2. We'll go over it just briefly, but before that, with transitive, just a couple more things. With transitive verbs, such as luo, we usually have a direct object. Transitive verb means that it transports something to something, so it takes a direct object, such as John destroyed the ball. John loué the ball. Luo can mean not only loose, but destroy. So if it's loué, third person singular with John, John is destroying the ball, actually. Not destroyed, that's past tense, which we don't have for a while. But my point is, transitive verbs take a direct object. Intransitive verbs do not take a direct object and often have instead a predicate nominative. For example, you are a good cricket player. You are a good cricket player is a predicate nominative. In other words, it predicates something to you. That's why we call it a predicate nominative. This is important to remember because both of these nouns, player and you, or ball and you, if it's a predicate nominative, would be in Greek in what we call the nominative case, which is the subject case. But if two nouns are joined together with is or was, or actually is being or was being, which is what the Greek verb generally more expresses, then there'll be both in the nominative case. She is the best student. That is a predicate nominative. The student is not a direct object because I am is an intransitive verb. I'm giving you too much information, actually more than you need, but some people like it. Okay, hopefully you learned this paradigm. We call this conjugating a Greek verb. The present indicative active, and for right now we'll just say the present active because we won't get to other moods. That's what indicative means. It is the mood, it is a statement or a question, or just a factual statement. That's the indicative mood. We won't get out of it probably till the very close to the end of our course. It is the most common expression verb in the New Testament. But you need to know the endings. Luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, luusin. Luomen, luete, luusin. Notice that the last one has what we call a movable nu. The movable nu comes in when the next word starts with a vowel. You can't have two vowels next to each other, or don't have them so often. So just because of pronunciation, naturally, when you're speaking, you kind of put an N between two words that end and begin with vowels. So luusin, velus. Notice that the verb encodes more information. It encodes the pronoun, I lose, you singular, by the way, and that's very important because the Greek language will tell us exactly whether the author is speaking to one person or many. And in many texts, that is crucial. You are the temple of the Lord, or your body is the temple, or places like that. Is Paul speaking singularly or in the plural? The exegesis sometimes is very interesting, depending whether it's singular or plural. So those are right now, for us, you. Nobody knows whether you're speaking to one or many, aside from the context. But in Greek, we do know. If we add, and by the way, in Greek, we have already created a simple sentence, simply by conjugating the present active. If we add, I get ahead of myself. I'm always either behind or ahead of myself. All right. Yeah. It's helpful to think, by the way, in terms of stem plus ending. So if I use another verb, akuo, for example, from the vocabulary list at the end of chapter 2. And by the way, you have to learn the vocabulary. So learn the vocabulary lists at the end of chapter 2. Now, you may be wondering still about pronunciation. The only thing I can do is to encourage you to listen and speak along with John chapter 1, read to you on the website that is on Moodle. Put there, it's the very last thing to do today. For today, I put it on there. You may not have seen it yet. A link to that website, and then slow it down in the settings on YouTube to half speed and it'll be much easier for you. And follow along first and then read along till you get used to reading and pronouncing Greek. I can't take time for that here. I'm already behind, but I think it was helpful to have for you to get to know our Pakistani brothers, and there were probably some sisters in the background. They would always stay in the background. So if I put another verb, aku, the ending is with the omega, I here, but instead here it's es, you here. And if I put a with the stem of lambano, lamban, a, then it's he, she, it receives or takes, either one, depending on the context. Esti, amen. We eat, or we are eating. Take the stem, add the ending. Echete. You have, or you hold, depending on the context again. And if you thought that Greek would answer all your questions, again, it will only raise more. It might answer some, but it will raise a lot more. But what it will do is help you think much more clearly and much more carefully. And using another verb, heurisk, find, heuriskusin, or heuriskusi. They are finding. So take any of those verbs at the end of chapter 2 and put the present tense, active, paradigm endings to them, and you have information with pronoun and verb. O, ace, a, amen, edit, usia. Told you my little song ditty last time. So just any way that you can learn those endings, because you have to have them in your head. You have to have the vocabulary and you have to have the endings, because if you don't, then you can't translate anything. Now, other thing we have to watch out for is that this third person singular and third person plural can agree with a noun in the sentence, and then suddenly, if the noun is in the nominative case, it might well be the subject instead of he, she, or it, or they. If it is singular with a third singular verb, it is probably the subject. If it is plural with a third singular verb, it is probably also the subject, if it is in what we call the nominative case. For example, heuriskomen, we are finding. We is the subject. I cannot have another subject. I could add the pronoun we, emes. If I did that, I would be stressing it. We ourselves are finding. It would be, so Jesus says, ego eimi, I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. By adding the pronoun, he is, of course, stressing in Greek himself. Eimi by itself simply means I am. It doesn't need ego, eimi. But Jesus deliberately uses ego, eimi, I am. Now, you have to be careful about context, because ego, eimi can, in certain contexts, simply mean it is I. When the disciples are scared silly, when Jesus comes to them walking on the water and says, it is I, it is a stress there, it is I, but it is not the same as I am the light of the world. He's not making a pronouncement there. Euriske, he, she, it is finding. If you find a singular noun in the nominative case, which we will mention in just a moment, I hope, it will be the subject, as will be a plural noun in the nominative case and a third person plural verb. They are finding, if I have anthropoi, men, actually human beings, because anthropos is gender neutral, even though it is masculine in gender, but it's actually in translation neutral. There's another word that means male on here, anthropos, from which we get anthropology, Anthropos is simply a human being, but normally translated man. In the 2,000 years ago, they didn't have a problem with that, but today we have, we have gender challenges. Gender challenges, is that understandable? Okay. So for example, Euriske ho Petros. Petros is the nominative case, the one you find in the dictionary, by the way, of Peter. Most proper names in Greek have the article, as they do in German, if you're talking about a particular Peter, the Peter. The Peter you know, der Peter, der Petro, der Peter. If it's biblical Peter, it would be Petrus. But der Peter means, in German, that Peter, the one that we both know. In Greek, I must get it from Greek because Greek uses the article usually with proper names. Articles are funny things. One scholar said that the greatest things the Greek did was to give us the article. It must have been a grammarian who said that, but it is truly important for our languages that in Greek we have the article with particular importance. We do not have an indefinite article in Greek. There is no a or an. There isn't either one in Urdu, so they're always leaving off the article, which drives me insane, especially when I read translations. But I drive them even more insane. Again, because Peter is in the nominative case and agrees with the third person singular Euriske, then Peter is the subject. If ho Petros kai ho Ioannes, notice that the iota with the next vowel moves into a y sound, Ioannes. Ho Petros kai ho Ioannes, Peter and John, then I have a plural verb, are finding. Then I have Euriskusin, third person plural. So I can't have any other subject with the first and second person, I, you, we, you plural, but I can with a third person singular and plural. Here the plural subject agrees with the third person plural verb. While we are here at this point, notice Euriske ho Petros and ho Petros Euriske both mean Peter is finding. Word order in Greek does not determine the function of a word in the sentence. I repeat, word order. That is so important in English. John hit the ball. We know who's doing the action. John, the subject. We know what the direct object is by the word order in English. Not so in Greek. It is the ending, what we call the case ending of the noun, that explains its function in the sentence. So ho Petros is the nominative case, must be the subject, or it could be the predicate nominative, as we mentioned before, in a certain case, but here either one means Peter is finding. Which one is more common? Probably the verb first, and there may be a little emphasis by putting Petros first. Hard to say. I am told beginning students should be careful in making statements about stress of sentences in Greek grammar, but in general, if a word is especially, or ideas especially stressed, it is either put forward in the sentence or, especially in questions, put at the end of the sentence. As the Sanhedrin question Peter and John, they say, who in whose name did you people do this? Humas at the end of the question is a ridiculing statement. How did the likes of you do a miracle like this? In speaking to them in Acts chapter 4. By putting humas at the end of the sentence, they are ridiculing, it is stressing it in the context, it is ridicule. So notice, because in Greek, the inflection, we call it inflection, the endings determine how a word is used, not the word order. And by the way, inflection will not only be endings, they can also be a prefix, which we call an augment, but one thing at a time. All right. Who's with me so far? Hands up. I'm not going to put hands down anyway, if I ask that question. So for review, luo, there's no augment for luo. There will be later. In other words, no prefix. I am listening. Aku es, you are hearing. Lambane, he, she, it is hearing, is receiving or taking. Unless I have a singular subject like Peter, then it's Peter is receiving or taking. We are eating, esti omen, echete, you plural are having, and plurisk usin, they are finding, unless I have Peter and John or a plural, other plural subject, and then that is probably the subject. Now the question, what is a noun? And you already know from the book, if you read it, the noun is a name of something. And we have common nouns, collective nouns, abstract nouns, and proper nouns in English. Notice vocabulary 1 is all proper nouns, proper names. Jerusalem, Peter, Abraham, all are masculine, except actually Jerusalem is feminine. And we will skip over the vocabulary because you can learn it yourself. But I want to add a few more. Anybody who recognizes what it is in Greek, say it. You don't have to say the article, but say the word. Okay. Ho, artos, the bread. Ho is the, artos is bread. I'm just adding a few nouns from chapters, vocabulary in chapter 2, V2, I call it, V3.1, and V3.2. Vocabulary words, you must know vocabulary words or you cannot translate a sentence. This is laos, from which we get the word laity. Ho, laos, the people. It can be plural. In the nominative case, hoi, laoi, in which case it would be the peoples. And yes, of course, the peoples can be plural, even in English. This is weos. Notice the hard breathing over we, diphthong, weos, but ho, weos, because it's masculine, and the ending is os, which is also masculine. The sun. Sun. I tried to find a gender neutral person and on the web, and I wasn't very successful for anthropos. The man, the human being, and it's interesting in Pakistan, all male students with almost without exception will translate the man, and all female students will translate the human being or the person. I allow that as well. I don't allow people for plural because that then confuses with vowels, although it would be a legitimate translation. And translations in English today that use gender neutral language are actually correct. They are correct because in Greek, if a person wants to specify the gender, male or female, they use other words to do it. This word, if you notice the chains on the man, is doulos, which is often known as the word for slave. It does not, by the way, mean servant. And I get so upset, even with dictionaries, which will translate it servant as well as slave. There are other words for servant. There are 5 or 6 common words in the New Testament for servant. Doulos almost consistently means slave. And when it's used only as servant, it's only because the action of serving is in view. So don't translate doulos as servant. If I see it in print on your paper, I will take your paper and burn it. Not literally, but I will feel like it. Doulos means slave. I am a slave of Christ Jesus, says Paul. I belong to him. The early church prays, we are your slaves. They also address God with the word despotes, not with the usual, oh Lord, Kyrios. They address him at the end of Acts chapter 4 with despotes, from which we get the word despot, of course, but don't transfer 2,000 years of English back into first century Greek. Despote simply means slave owner, master. We belong to you, so do with us as you will. You are in complete control of everything that is going on. If we read the end of Acts chapter 4 and study it and let it get into our hearts, I am convinced that our prayers would be totally different than we usually are. But I've got to stop preaching. That is my problem, but my students like it when I do, because they don't have to learn as much Greek. This is the picture I used for logos, which means word or reason. When John said, in archein ho logos, in the beginning was being the word, he was actually using a word that would mean for Jews, the word of God in terms of the Old Testament, but for Gentiles would mean the reason for life, which they discussed in detail to death in their philosophy. What is the Logos? Who is behind everything? Why are we here? And John hits both with one stroke. He loves to do that. He will use a word with double meaning on purpose, even in verse 5 again. But Logos means what is the expression of God, and it also means what is the reason that we are here. The reason, the ultimate reason, is the person of God himself. This is a bit of the vocabulary. I'm going to skip over the rest of these because you can learn them on your own. This one, kai, means and it's a conjunction. Obviously, it's not a noun or a verb, but it's very useful to know. In fact, conjunctions are key to the understanding of the New Testament. Thanks to Wycliffe Bible translators and their work in linguistics, we know a lot more in the last 20 years about how conjunctions develop the Greek text. And it is fascinating. It is horribly hard reading, but it is fascinating reading. For example, a discourse grammar of the Greek New Testament. Ask Bruce Kane about developments in discourse analysis, and I don't know if you'll understand his answer, but I think you'll be edified by it. Okay, recognizing the function of nouns, cases, and endings. And we are dealing with what we call the second declension masculine nouns. That is all we have right now, are masculine nouns. They are not necessarily masculine because there is something masculine about them, any more than cities are feminine because Hey Jerusalem. They are simply masculine, feminine, or neuter because they are masculine, feminine, or neuter, and it probably has to do with the development way back of the language itself. The Holy Spirit is neuter in Greek. That does not mean it isn't. The Holy Spirit isn't it. It simply means that in the Greek language, the word spirit developed as a neuter word. That's all it means. Except for obvious things like wife and mother and father. Those are as you would usually expect. Now, first of all, he teaches you in chapter 3, section 1, the nominative and the accusative case forms of these nouns. For example, and the the nominative is usually the subject or can be a predicate nominative. By the way, remember, it can predicate something to the subject with the verb is or was, is being or was being, because it's usually progressive in Greek. I've got to move us out of the corner here. Okay. Logos is what we find in the dictionary, the nominative masculine singular, but the ending logon, it means that it's a direct object, probably. It is the accusative form, we say. Not because it is being accused of anything, but because grammar has its own funny developments. So the direct object, logon, then would be a direct object in a sentence. I see it in Greek, and I know it's the direct object in the sentence. I see logoi, and I know it is the nominative plural, words, and it is probably the subject of a sentence. And I see logus, and I know that it is the direct object, but it is plural. A man spoke words. A man is the subject, spoke is the let's use the present tense. A man is speaking words. Logus is the direct object. Now, if we add the article, which we need to do, you'll notice in most cases it makes sense. Ha logos. So go back, ha and ton in the singular, hoi and tous in the plural. Add them to the words, and we have ha logos. If it is the direct object, we have ton logon. If it is the plural subject of the sentence, hoi, notice hoi, not oi, hoi, hard breathing, hoi logoi, the subject, the words, tous logus, the words. Translation, in all cases, either the word or the words. The only difference is the function in the sentence. It is either the subject of the sentence or the direct object. So if I have anthropos, we on, eche, I notice that I have a third person singular verb. He, she, it is having, but I have a noun in the nominative case, singular anthropos. And I have a noun in the accusative case, we on. So it is clear the sentence means a man is having a son. No article. All right? Usually in Greek that means, we translate it English, a man, generalizing, is having a son. Or a man has a son. You can also translate the simple present if you want. Turn it around, and it still means the same thing. A man is having a son, because the word order is not important for function. It is only important for stress. Probably here, no, this would be the normal order. So this would be a man is having a son. For whatever reason he wanted to stress, he put a man first. This means the same. No, it doesn't. The difference here is the semicolon at the end, which is a Greek question mark, which we have to translate into English. Is a man having a son? Or for flowing English, what do we call that? For a good English, we would usually say, does a man have a son? Which drives Pakistani students crazy. Why does you have to have the verb does? It's just because that's what we say in questions in English. Does a man have a son? Is a man having a son? Is very kind of, it's literal in a sense, but it's not really good English. So for example, Euriste ho Petros. Peter is finding, because Peter is in the nominative case and agrees with the third person singular Euriste. Peter is finding. Euriskus in ho Petros kai ho Ioannes. Peter and John are finding because the plural subject agrees with the verb. But euryskete ton Petron does not equal Peter is finding, because Peter is in the accusative case. He cannot be the subject here. And furthermore, euryskete means you plural are finding. So I must translate you, and usually it's good to put plural in parentheses in class. You don't have to hand in papers, but Pakistani students do. You plural are finding Peter. Why? Because Peter is in the Ton Petron. Ton Ioannes. Now, Ioannes you'll find in chapter 4 when you get there. There are certain nouns that don't decline, or they decline differently, like Jesus. Ioannes, cities don't decline, which is why it's very useful to have the article in Greek with the word, because otherwise I can't tell it's accusative very often if I just have Ioannes. If I have ton Ioannes, then I know, Ioannes is the direct object, he's not the subject. So the article is very helpful, even though I don't translate the John in English. We don't use articles with proper names, or it's not German. So I don't translate it. Pakistani students do, and I keep marking it off, or my beloved assistant does, marking it wrong. Don't put the John. Okay. Now remember, in Greek, the inflection, in this case, the endings, determine how the word is used, not word order as in English. So as we close, and I wish I'd gotten further, but you need to learn chapter 3.2. The other cases, we have 5 that we need to know, well, actually 4, because the vocative case is used to address someone, and only in the masculine singular is it of any importance, because otherwise it's always the same as the nominative. But the singular masculine changes to epsilon if you are addressing logos, word. Oh, loge, oh, word. See, I'm addressing word with loge. That's the vocative case, but we will eventually drop using it because most of the time is the same as the nominative case. But there are 4 cases, and if you study the end of chapter 3, the last half, you will learn the indirect object or object of prepositions. You will learn the possessive, the genitive. So how that word changes to express, to encode that information. To close, in arche, let's say it together. John 1:1 together. In arche, ein ho logos, kai ho logos, ein pros ton theon, kai theos, ein ho logos. And you have probably heard that Jehovah's Witnesses love to translate the word was a God. And this is where the famous rule by a grammarian named Colwell, who did his PhD thesis on this in 1933, called Colwell's rule, because of this. If a noun is in the predicate and comes before the verb, in this case, was being, in most, either is or was, if it comes in front, the one that has the article is the subject. That's the simple rule. Why put theos first then? Why not say hologos kai theos? Because theos is being stressed. It's put first before, and the word was God, said John in his first gospel. Actually, he's not equating the word Jesus, we find out later, with the Father. But I'll explain that later. It's what we call qualitative. The word was God-like. And we'll talk about it later. Okay, thank you. Study chapter 3.2 and learn chapter 4. You're grown up. I can give you an assignment. If we learn chapter 4 for next time, which is the neuter form of what we call the second declension, and the nouns are very similar, except you have to watch out for the nominative singular, which looks like the masculine accusative. We have some new vocabulary you have to add, but try your best to add chapter 4, and then we can stay on schedule, because I would like to, when we get to December 6th, be ready for some Hebrew. And if we can keep moving at good speed, we will get there. Are we okay? God bless you. God bless the service, and God bless South Carolina in the rain. Amen.
I'm coming this morning in rain to my house, my book. No, it's been delivered on the phone. Yeah, so I apologize for not being prepared, but thank you for all your work doing this, and appreciate it. Yes, I am. Yeah, but you're doing all the work, and thank you. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. Oh, my, you're out there doing the work.
I don't know. These are where they were when I came in, and I was asked to put them back, but I can't put them back
Well, maybe she just been doing this.
if I don't know how they were.
Well, just like this, we'll just leave it like that.
But I wrote them all. My friend was Forgive me, please, if you don't see me in church. But my wife has
I was gonna ask, is Jenny okay?
she has a board meeting this morning on Zoom. So, you know, at times are all over the world. So
Oh, my.
she's got a,
Is she on the?
she's on the international board.
Oh, Bridget Cross.
Yeah. Which is a good place for her to trade with. In fact, she's really active chairman.
Oh, my goodness. Well, she's good at language learning, isn't she?
Well, she's good at organizing. And she's never seen it.
But she said she was learning at her too, really well.
Well, I say so. When the gardener comes to the door, he says, "Now come to the doors together." I want to talk to your wife.
Oh, man.
You want to talk to her?
What did you say? None that I know.
Well, I wrote,
Thank you. Well, yes, thank you. I will, I can let you fire. Oh, yeah. Sometimes you get a
it.